Well. If you're here, that means you can't read, and the thumbnail caught your eye. If you saw the title of
Oh
this
my
video, you know
god,
this was a
bro.
tier list on the best
Hell
artistic
no,
figures from the
man.
last century, engineered by 5 idiots, and 6 you clicked, you are obligated to stay.
Number 10, we have the Missourian maestro, Thomas Hart Benton. Benton was an influential artist and muralist in the 1930s, well known for his murals depicting the American way of life and modern developments in technology. He also was a terrific teacher who brought fame to many other artists in his time, including Jackson Pollock, Honored Blanche, and Richard Thomas.
Now, for a fun fact about Thomas Benton, he was an illustrator for the US Navy during World War I. When America entered World War I, Thomas Benton was working as a director of the People's Gallery and teaching for the Chelsea Neighborhood Association in New York. He enlisted in 1918 and was sent to Norfolk, Virginia Naval Base. His job was to make drawings of what he saw happening around the base, which allowed him access to many areas where he could observe people working. He furthered his devotion to realism and strived to show the working man and machinery in an honest way, not in an idealized fashion. The watercolors he produced during his time in the Navy were put on display at the Daniel Galleries in New York. After he was discharged in 1990, he returned to New York. Number 9, we have Benny Goodman, the king of swing. Beginning as a solo artist in 1930, the charming clarinets roped a band together in 33 and toured America in 35. At the Palomar Ballroom in LA, Benny Goodman's voice took control of the audience and opened up the gates to the swing era, an era of altered jazz that people danced to as they suffered in crippling debt. Benny Goodman was the son of 2 poor Jewish immigrants. Benny's mother never learned to speak English, and his father worked for a tailor. Benny had 11 siblings. He learned to play the clarinet in a boys' band run by a charity. He became a strong clarinet player at an early age and started playing professionally at only 16 years old. It may be time for you to get up and stop binge watching on your couch and do something productive.
In eighth place, Jackson Pollock was an American painter and a key member of the abstract art movement. He was best known for his drip technique, where he randomly dumped paint on a canvas he placed flat on the floor or something. The art style was described as radical, but to me it kinda seems like Pollock just had a slew of temper tantrums. After seeing Guernica and other masterpieces, Pollock shifted from the regionalist style to his drip paintings, which were so amazing, even a 3-year-old could make one.
Shut up, Nikhil. Anyways, despite the paintings seemingly being so simple to make, most artists couldn't even come close to the action paintings of Jackson Pollock. These paintings had a deep meaning that couldn't be grasped by a naive eye. His work brought new ideas to the table, and his masterpiece, Lavender Mist, was the height of his breakthrough. As a paragon of creativity, Pollock was celebrated by the art community for his ingenuity in bringing American painting to the level of European modernism.
Big Mama Thornton takes the cake for 7th place as a masterful R&B artist who defined what it meant to be a female African-American singer. Her music laid the foundations for rock and roll, and sadly, she isn't credited for it. In fact, Thornton only made $500 off of her hit rendition of Hound Dog, which sold 2 million copies. That means that for every 4,000 copies sold, she only made $1. But when Elvis did it, he raked in millions. Despite that, her presence on the stage and ability to connect to her audience made Thornton one of a kind, as she paved the way for future female singers. Thornton's sheer talent allowed her to secure herself as a pillar that would soon have the empire of rock and roll built onto it.
At the top of the bottom 5, Andy Warhol, the quote-unquote commercial artist, film director, and producer, added the pop art style to the bracket during the 20th century. He made art with his blotted ink drawings, which involved the same image copy-pasted in a grid with slight alterations to each other, usually in color. I could do that in Google Anyway, Warhol centralized his work around the factory and his studio. His top works included Campbell's Soup Cans and Maryland Dip Jets, with the latter is a very well-known classic in pop art. Warhol also produced 2 TV shows, Andy Warhol's TV and Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes. Real creative man. Warhol's defiance to tradition allowed him to push abstraction in new directions, and again rewrites the standards of art. Fun fact about Andy Warhol, inspired by the automats of the 1950s, he dreamed of opening one himself. He was gonna name it Andy Man. He just had a knack for slapping his name on things, like some celebrities nowadays.
At the bottom of the top 5, one of the greatest rock bands in the world, the Rolling Stones. Emerging in the early 60s, they took the country by storm with their outlandish style of music. By merging the blues with rock and roll, the Rolling Stones brought different people together. South African Americans who used to listen to blues started to enjoy rock and roll due to the influence of the Rolling Stones. They were brought together with the Northern Whites who enjoyed rock and roll originally. They also had a rebellious punk style which resonated with many young adults and college students. They wanted to stand out and rebel against the conformities of society. Symbolizing a sense of freedom and adventure, the Rolling Stones influenced many teens of the 60s.
Fun fact time, you know Keith Richards, the poster child for sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Yeah, that guy, he was a Boy Scout.
The one and only Elvis Presley surprisingly sits at 4th place. But don't worry, we have even crazier people coming up. Anyways, Elvis was the king of rock and roll, the teenage idol, and every parent's worst nightmare. By fusing different genres, Elvis could attract fans of all demographics by using gospel, R&B, country, and so forth. In most of his songs, Elvis was required from the waist up due to constantly making questionable motions with his pelvis, giving him the nickname Elvis Pelvis Presley. Anyhow, this influence even reached into fashion, popularizing leather jackets and tight jeans, which fans mirrored. Elvis's influence broke down cultural barriers in music and brought new attitudes to race and sexuality, giving parents migraines the whole time.
Did someone say fun fact time? Yeah, that's right. Elvis once asked his limo driver, "Do you own this limo or do you work for the company?" The limo driver responded, "I work for the company." And Elvis said, "You know what? No, now you own the limo. The tip for this ride, it's the entire limousine."
At 3rd place, taking the bronze medal, we have Bing Crosby. This multimedia star handled music, radio, and even movies. He released hundreds of hit singles, starred in many films, and created a radio show that amassed a peak of 50 million listeners. While being a distinguished actor, Crosby was producing top hits in double time, with his best work being White Christmas, from the musical with the same name.
Fun fact, White Christmas was so popular that the master copy got damaged from other pressing copies on top of it, meaning Bing had to re-record it later on.
He's also the first person to receive the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. But that's no biggie, anybody could do that. Bing Crosby starred in a myriad of movies, and he has appeared in numerous TV specials. He even raised $14.5 million during World War II for the war effort. His baritone voice has become synonymous with old school music, and he's nothing short of a legend.
In 2nd place, we have the one artist everyone thinks about in the 20th century. And don't worry, Mr. Martinez, cause this guy originated far from Alabama. Pablo Picasso, the maestro of paint, the Einstein of art, the mad lad who made over 20,000 art pieces during his career, had the greatest visual art influence the world had seen until that point. He also has a 23-word-long name, but that's not that important. One of his paintings had a huge influence, being Guernica, which was used as an anti-war statement in World War II. It goaded Pollock, who's a bit further down the rankings, into changing his art style, as well as garnering a lot of support for anti-war movements. His work now resides in the Louvre and other famous art galleries in the world, and his legacy will never be forgotten. You can't make a list of artists without Picasso. He's literally the default artist people refer to today, which truly shows the extent of his influence. And finally, the number one you've been waiting for, and just to be sure, we in the green. As we were saying,
The Beatles, the signature band of the European music invasion. They were formed in Liverpool by John Lennon, Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. Their songs have become timeless classics, and they have helped usher in the youth movement. Their music inspired a wave of social and political change, and their fashion influence extended quite far, with bright clothes and accessories galore. The Beatles reign as one of the most legendary bands in the world, and have sold more than 1 billion units globally. And there you have it. Please like and